its great voyages, its great goal. So, you think one meaning we have of narrative is that of the continuation of a story. So if you think of the story of the modern, of humanity progressing in some way, advancing technology and advancing aesthetically, and it doesn't go with Lyotard at all. It's just an illusion. And it's now beginning also to become very apparent to him in post-industrial societies. He then goes on to say, where after meta-narrative can legitimacy reside? The operativity criterion is technological. It has no legitimacy for judging what is true or just. Is legitimacy to be found in consensus obtained through discussion, as Jürgen Habermas thinks? Such consensus does violence to the heterogeneity of language games. Okay, so he's outlined here then two systems he's going to attack throughout it. The first one is the operativity criterion, which is, at its extreme end, is a fascist way of thinking. It's considering society as a complete unity, and it's like a computer, and it wants to be as efficient as possible in doing what it does, which for late capitalism is expanding indefinitely and just creating more capital to expand even further. The other one he's having a dig at is Jürgen Habermas, who is a dialectical thinker, which means he separates society into two different areas. So, as I said, there's the life world and there's the system in one. There's also, if you think of Marx's critique, there's the bourgeois and the proletariat. And what Jürgen Habermas believes is that to obtain legitimacy of power and legitimacy of knowledge, and to society to progress, there needs to be discussion between people. We need to come to some sort of consensus of the way things work. And in that way, we can sort of progress. We can progress on knowledge, we can progress just how things should be run. He's got a great faith in democracy, but a certain type of democracy, in other words. And he's the other end, he's a left-wing thinker. And where Lyotard comes is, he considers himself left-wing, but of a different type of Habermas. And Habermas, he thinks, is just some sort of, at the extreme end, some flips over to some sort of quasi-Stalinist. So, though Habermas doesn't believe it, he thinks that's underlying Habermas' system, even though Habermas doesn't know. Yeah, so that's what he's generally after. There's Habermas. Yeah, he's worth reading, by the way. He's like, when you think of postmodernism, by the way, you think of Foucault, and you think of Derrida, and you think of Lyotard and Baudrillard, and all these wonderful, crazy characters, and Deleuze as well, who've got all these wonderful, wacky ideas, and they're really good writers, where you come across Habermas, and he's really doughy, and his books are really long, and, but he's really, really good, and he's really, really clever, and when I go throughout this, because I'm talking about Lyotard, it's going to be attacking him constantly, so I'm going to try and defend him as he goes, but he's really, really worth looking into, because he throws postmodernism completely into relief with a very, very compelling opposed Marxist theory. So yeah, this is generally what he's getting. This is generally what, just outlining what a couple of Lyotard's main problems are. One of them's legitimacy in terms of knowledge, and legitimacy in terms of power and the relationship between the two. So social relations, who does what, and also knowledge relations, who says what, and how the two are connected. So, because the right to decide what is true is not independent of the right to decide what is just. If anyone's read Foucault, you probably come across that quite a lot. Knowledge and power are intimately connected in some sort of way. Even if the statements consigned to these two authorities differ in nature, the point is that there is a strict interlinkage between the kind of language called science and the kind called ethics and politics. Knowledge and power are simply two sides of the same question. So, for Lyotard, he admits there are two different types of statements. If I employ to do something, if I say, do not murder your neighbour, which is want to do justice, that's a different type of statement. That's a prescriptive statement as opposed to a descriptive statement like grass has got chlorophyll inside which is able to synthesise stuff from the sun. And so they've got two different types of statements here, and they don't seem to connect together. When you say what he's not concerned about that so much. He admits that, he allows for that, but he still thinks there's some sort of connection between the two. And it's not a connection of individual states itself, it's a connection which underlies language itself completely. So where's he coming from here? If it's not some sort of connection which you can find in the statements, it's some which is just completely homogenised in language, which is sort of like interlinking them. And if anyone's read Wittgenstein, it comes down to language games. So, has anyone read Wittgenstein? No? Okay, it's good fun, because everyone's really, really intimidated by Wittgenstein's theory of Tractatus Logicus Philosophicus, and I can't understand it, no one else can understand it, I know. And it's really horrible and hard. When it comes to language games, it's quite simple and straightforward. It's really intuitive. You can actually do lots of games with it. It's really cool. So what Wittgenstein means by language games is that each of the various categories of utterance can be defined in terms of rules specifying their own properties and the uses to which they can be put. In exactly the same way as the game of chess is defined by a set of rules determining the properties of each of the pieces. In other words, the proper way to move them. So you know, if you ever played chess before, you can describe some of the rules just by saying what each of the pieces does. And it's the same with language. There's no sort of way you can describe what language does in terms of some sort of meta-language. I'll read the rest of this, I'll come on to that later actually in a second. These for example, actually no, I'll leave that. A meta-language would be when you talk about language. You know, when I talk about language, if I talk about language, it comes up with all sorts of paradoxes, like this statement is false. If you ever heard that, I always say, some kids play to each other, you know, this statement is false. Is it false, is it true? Because if it's true, if it's false. Because what you've got there in that statement is you've got a statement which makes a statement about itself. Because can language do that? How can you speak outside of language? Think of water. How would you, say if you wanted to set water down in rigid rules, you could explain to someone else, water just flows around everywhere. You can't set out a rigid thing. You can also categorise it with water. You can't sort of like make more water to contain water. You know, because it'll just slosh everywhere. I mean, you could say you can say some sort of plastic container and get loads of plastic containers, but that's something completely different to language. We don't have anything but language. Think of something else. Even if, because the analogy is faulty, you might say, well, language isn't like water; it's like granite. You know, it's relatively stable because words don't change that often. You know, granite changes not that often. But if you think of even granite, just to extend the analogy. And you want to contain granite, because that's the important thing. You want something to categorise it. You want a category under which to put granite. And you surround it with more granite. You haven't actually contained it. You've just got more granite. Can you see? In a really simple way. I'm trying to think of say, another way this works. It's also called Russell's paradox. And it's come across Bertrand Russell. If every single human has a mother, I hope. Okay? However, does the human race have a mother? No. So the individual part, which you can understand, cannot act as a category for the whole. So any single human cannot act as a category for the whole. So the properties of a human don't act to be categorized. So everything in the universe has a cause, but the universe doesn't have a cause, because you know, it's a very good argument against Christians who say otherwise. So anyway, just going back to language. So there's nothing outside language games. Language is just this thing and we use it like a tool. We don't use it like, we don't attach it to things. We use language when we want to get something done. So it's performative in the sense that if I get the professor of the university, which I go to, and he opens a new building, and he says, I declare this building open. And what he's done there is, how has he declared it open? He's used language to do so. It's a performative statement. And what if I say, pass the salt sometimes? And if I say in a certain tone, and implied within that statement is, can you please pass the salt? If there's other types of performatives within that one performative. At the moment, there's also something like, in the actual word, pass the salt, there's a command. But you wouldn't do it if it was a command, would you? There's also implied within that, even though it's not in the words, there's also some sort of request or some sort of plea. So it's performative and it's applied in its use rather than in the way people use it, rather than in some sort of thing beyond its actual use. Language only has meaning within its use and the way it's used between people.